Hit record.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wendy. And thank you all for being here. I'm sure it feels like it's been a long time since we last saw each other, but glad we can pick back up where we left off. Today is all about pictures of practice, which is why it's so important we have Johnny here, because we're going to really dig into facilitation of the question formulation technique and learn more about what it could really look like in your own classroom. Okay. As always, you can find all of today's materials at our event page on our website, and Katie is going to help me out and add a link in the chat box. It has today's PowerPoint and any other supplementary resources we share. And if you haven't already, we encourage you to join our free network on our website. It just gives you access to a bunch of free teaching and learning resources. And as always, feel free to use and share these resources. So I want to thank you all for all the work you've been doing up to this point and that you continue to do. I know after our first session in September, we asked you to complete your very first Q Focus. And after that, after our last session in November, we put you to work to finish a QFT lesson and ideally practice facilitating it at least once. And it didn't have to be with your class, but just practice facilitating it with maybe a forced family member or a few helpful students, but just get a taste of that facilitation. And then we'll talk more at the end about this, but your homework, your last homework assignment from us after today, will be to put it all together and really actually facilitate that with your students if you haven't yet. And talking to Wendy, we haven't finalized it yet, but we're hoping to see you all again one last time in late spring, early summer to put it all together. As I said, our agenda today is focusing on facilitating QFT and looking at how you can really tailor the strategy to your own students. So I keep saying facilitate, facilitating, facilitator, and that's just because that's the special hat you wear as a teacher when you do the QFT. And it's not always intuitive. So I want us to take a minute to just reflect on these words, facilitation or facilitator, and think about what comes to mind for you when you hear these words. What existing connotations or connections do you have to these words? So take a minute and feel free to share that in the chat box, and Katie can read aloud some pieces of your reflection if you're comfortable.
Bobby said to help.
Thank you.
A guide. Guide on the side, a guide to learning. Guide. Keeps process moving. Guide.
Awesome.
Makes something easier through examples, modeling, etc. One who organizes the process or activity. The person who's there to help. They help with making things easier to do. Planner.
What about non-judgmental? That was, and I would say that versus put it in the chat. I couldn't type it that quick.
Yeah, thank you. These are all really interesting and useful for, I think, us all to hear, to see where we're coming in and what we currently think that means to us. Keep that in mind, what you think it is, because we're going to watch now the first few minutes of an instructional video of ours, and it shows the QFT being facilitated in a 12th grade humanities classroom in Boston. And I know not all of you are in the 12th grade or at high school at all, but this video still just shows the process in action. And in particular, while you're watching, I want you all to pay attention to what you see the teacher doing, as well as what the students are doing. So take note of those two roles, and either while we're watching or after I'll invite you, feel free also to add in the chat what you're noticing. And oh, let me know if you can hear this audio. I might have to.
I can't hear it
You
right
can't hear
now.
it. Okay. I know Katie's the only one who would know music is supposed to play. Let's see. Share sound.
Yeah.
How about now? Okay.
Yep.
My name is Linksa Chesnakis, teach 12th grade humanities, and today we'll be doing the question formulation technique. I think of the QFT as a thinking strategy, and what students are going to be doing is preparing for a Socratic seminar tomorrow where they're going to be discussing questions that they created today. And I'm not going to be doing any of the generating questions, all that work is on them. And they're also going to be using those questions to help them break down the writing process when they get to their final assessment for the book that we're about to finish reading, which is called The Brief, Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. So let's get right into it. Group 1 and 2, this is your Q focus. Junior thinks that Trujillo treated the Dominican Republic like it was his plantation and he was the master. This may look familiar to you from the book. Group 3 and 4, this is your Q focus. Fate controls lives. We just have to accept that. All right, ready, set, go. 5 minutes.
Who was Trujillo?
Remember to write down questions exactly as stated.
Yo, where's T from? His name is T now. Where's T from? T. Where's T from?
What's
No,
Who controls fate? Yeah, that's what I said. What controls fate?
I think he exaggerated how Trujillo was.
How did he become so powerful?
It's okay.
So does he have any kids or relatives?
Oh, what relation had Junior with Trujillo?
Another minute, keep going.
Oh, that is a good question.
Yeah, thank you.
Every group try to get a couple more questions out. What are open-ended questions?
Open-ended questions. Open-ended questions require an explanation and cannot be answered with yes or no, or with one word.
Thank you. Okay, so go to it. You have a minute to classify your questions, okay? And if you're not sure, ask your partners. If you're not sure, ask your group members.
What controls faith? Is that a quote? Closed-ended or open-ended? Because you can't answer it. You can't answer it with. It's an open-ended question because you can't really answer it with a yes or no answer.
Close is yes or no, right?
Yeah.
I think
Open is like you can answer
like a one-word answer. So does fate exist? That's close.
How does this shape? Instead of putting how, just put does this shape. So that's a yes or no, because it's open-ended.
Wait, I don't know. I thought that sounds.
What are some good things, some advantages of a closed-ended question, meaning one that can only be answered with a word or yes or no? Yeah, Evan?
Straight to the point. You have the answer like that.
How about the disadvantages, some not so good things about closed-ended questions, meaning questions that have one-word answers or yes or no, some disadvantages. Kenny?
You don't give enough details.
You don't give enough detail?
It's not really saying anything.
It's not really saying anything?
You just have a bunch of follow-up questions. If you found one question that just sets you up to answer all of those questions, then that'd be better. You get all the information you're looking for.
So what you're going to do in the next 2 minutes, you're actually going to manipulate your questions now, okay? Choose one close-ended that you labeled with a C. Make it open by either adding or taking away a word. Then choose an open-ended question, make it closed. Close it off. You could take away, add a word, okay? So just choose one of each. So choose one closed, make it open. Choose one open, make it closed. Okay, so take 3 minutes to decide what your 3 most important are, deliberate, circle them, and then write down why you chose them. Okay?
Or whatever, like the 3 best questions.
I think we should choose the 2 that we switched in a different one.
So does fate control lives?
Yeah, does fate control lives, and why does fate control lives? And a different one.
I like what are some examples?
Yeah.
Yeah, but
That's one number 5.
But without
So
we need to
fate
find out
determines-
we need to find out if fate exists to find out all the rest of these questions.
Oh, that's what. Nah, but that is a part of the question. Does fate control lives, and do you really think, and why does fate control lives? Does fate control lives? Why does fate control lives? And Sleep determines lives. How do you determine fate? So we could do those things.
Like, what is it? What's the historical significance behind that?
These three are closed, but it's good to have one open one just to like why this is important. Why this is so important. The way he treated Dominicans in the book. Yeah, that's what I said. The way
It's
he
okay
treated-
if there's some disagreement here. If you're like, I really like this one, but you like that one, you can talk about why. All right? Because you're going to want to write down on the back of your chart paper why you chose those three. And then you're going to share that with the small group that had your same Q focus in a few minutes, okay?
Okay. Sorry to pull it away from you. You can watch it after, but that was just a snapshot of those facilitation principles. So I already see some thoughts already came in the chat, but if you haven't already, what did you observe the teacher doing and what did you observe the students doing? And Katie, if you don't mind reading some of these out.
Sure. I'll go back to some that were said before. Students are discussing the types and strengths of their questions and why. Giving the students all the power. Students redirecting versus teachers redirection equals learning. Someone mentioned that for open and close, they call them right there and versus and think and search questions. Let's see, students are discussing with one another. The teacher is prompting and keeping on track. The students are discussing and debating. The teacher is moving students through the learning, organizing the learning. Students were helping others share their ideas. Evaluating, I think students were doing that. When they prioritize, they're evaluating their own questions and each other's, respectful dialogue with each other too. Student-led teacher guiding.
Yeah, thank you all. These are fantastic close observations. And I want you to hold on to those because we're just going to keep talking about them and what it might look like for you. So the 4 facilitation principles, as we've determined them, are to 1, monitor student adherence to the process, 2, do not give examples, 3, do not get pulled into group discussion, and 4, acknowledge all contributions equally. So these are what we encourage all teachers and facilitators really to follow, which is difficult. It's not the most natural thing, which we know. So in a moment, you all are going to move into breakout rooms to really talk about these and break them down for you. What do you think might be difficult about following each of these, as well as why do you think each might be really important to follow for student learning? And for those of you who've gotten a chance to facilitate before today, this is a great opportunity to bring in that experience you've had and talk about for yourself what was difficult or what was surprising to you. So just some more reflection time too. Katie can add a Google Doc for you all to open, which just has some breakout room instructions. And you'll also see that I'm going to ask one of you from each group to be brave and prepared to report back with us. So you'll get about 10 minutes, and yeah, we're looking forward to hearing more about what you all discuss. Yeah, and please open the Google Doc before you all disappear because it's so hard to find things again.
Are people making a copy of this document or just writing it all in the same document?
No, it should just be, you don't have to write anything on it. Great
Oh,
question.
just instructions.
It's
Okay.
just kind of to have this slide on hand when you move away.
Got it.
But no worries, you don't need to write anything.
Okay, sounds good.
Iman, how long do you want to send them to breakout rooms? I was
About
busy.
10 minutes. Oh, no problem. Yeah, about 10 minutes.
I was
And if it
shuffling.
looks like we need more, we
Okay.
can always call people in sooner.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Are you ready for them to?
Yes, we'll see you all soon. Yeah, I know Johnny said he definitely wanted to join a breakout room, so I'm sure he'll have some fun.
Oh, good.
Trying to watch to make sure everyone is making sure they're kind of evenly distributed.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
You're gonna stop recording while we're doing this too.
We think.
It looks like
Okay.
we have 51 back with us. So we are
Okay, great. So now is the time where I open it up and I ask someone from each group, someone super brave, to share something in the chat box, or feel free to unmute yourself and share with us something that stuck with you from your conversation.
I'll just go ahead and say that when I was talking with the ones in the chat room with me, it was just kind of nice to see we all struggled with similar things. And we were able to talk through, such as we talked about how the not giving examples was something we really struggled with, and the not getting pulled into the group discussions because it may actually, interfere with what they come up with as a team and put the leadership on us. And in the group that I was with, it seemed like, and we had, I know I teach first grade, and I know one of the ladies is a special ed teacher, and I know one of them's fifth grade, and we had some other grades as well. So it wasn't just one grade level, but throughout the grades, we had similar struggles and experiences. And so I thought that was kind of neat to find out. And it kind of stuck with me that it was universally, we want to help.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
I'll speak for my group. We were in group 5 and we kind of had a similar experience. We talked a lot about how our students often take this in a direction that we don't expect. And that's hard for a teacher because we like to have control, and we foresee a lesson going in a specific direction. But when you act as facilitator, it doesn't always go the way that you want it to go. And we saw that across all the different grade levels as well. It was interesting because I teach high school, and I really expected my students in my lesson to go deep into analysis with these pictures and their questions. But I didn't see that at all. Whereas another one of our members, Brandy, her students went way deep, and she was expecting something more literal. So it was interesting how, again, we had the same struggles, and taking that as a facilitator, that's sometimes really tough for teachers to do, to let it go in a direction that you aren't necessarily expecting.
Thank you. I'm glad to see that it's really meaningful to have a mix of grade levels talking and sharing. Anyone else? Maybe just one more piece of discussion.
Our group, hopefully I can come in okay because I'm outside with the phone. Our group said many of the same things, not stepping in. We also talked about maybe we picked the wrong picture for what we were doing or something, because it is hard to not step in. And some of us are from primary, and you think they're going to go one way with a picture or questioning, and they go a whole different way. It takes the class a whole different way. And it's hard not to step in and make them go the way you want, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate hearing all of those challenges and successes and things to keep thinking about. Feel free to keep adding any reflections in the chat as we move on. Yeah, okay, a lot of people agree with one another. That's great. So the reasoning behind these principles, it's all the culmination of us observing what was happening in the classroom once teachers did follow these principles. Once they were kind of doing it themselves, we could identify that what happens is students get a chance to argue and come to consensus and problem solve independently. And you're putting this work back onto the students to think really divergently and broadly about their own questions. And also, as you saw kind of in the video too, it's an opportunity for students to seek internal validation or validation from their peers, saying like, that's a great question, or let's put that down. And then you as facilitator, it's a different role for sure, but it's still so important for you to be facilitating, and by choosing your cue focus and just doing this, you're designing and protecting a space for students to practice the skill of asking questions. So it might feel really strange and counterintuitive, but the idea is hopefully with more practice, it becomes a space for this, and you are still supporting students in their questioning. Maybe Johnny can share too here, like what was your initial experience with the principles for the first time? What was that shift like for you? Put you on the spot, Johnny.
No, Johnny on the spot. Yeah, you know, when I first learned about the QFT, I went to something like this in person, and I was too intimidated by it and actually didn't even try it for the first year that I knew about it. Then I tried it in the classroom for the first time, and I was trying to get kids to ask questions about the beheading of King Charles I and Louis XVI, and they were asking questions about aliens. And I thought, this is a disaster. And then the next semester I tried it again, and I did it in a more low stakes environment for my advisory class. And I just picked an easy cue focus. I just wrote my plans for the summer. And then, you know, I posted the rules, and usually I go through the rules with the kids and they see it up there, and we give examples of what the rules look like. You know, ask as many questions as you can. You know, no judgment, change a statement into a question. And I always say, like, if someone says, this is stupid, they can say, what? Is this stupid? Why do I think it's stupid? Something like that. And so, you know, as you gain familiarity and comfort, and also presenting it to the kids as a game, it puts them into a mindset where, you know, they will, they'll be participating. You'll feel more comfortable with sort of letting loose of the reins. Then you'll be surprised that once you do it, the horses are going to stay on track. They're not going to totally run off into the wilderness. And as you develop cue focuses, you'll, like, for example, crop pictures. So you know that they will be asking questions about a specific thing rather than some of the things that you don't want them to ask questions about. Let's see. Is that a good sort of, oh, and then the also thing, not getting pulled into discussion, something that that we do is, you know, instead of saying, oh, that's a good question, because that's hard to stop yourself from saying too, you just try to say thank you to everything. Thank you. And just write it down. And again, when you're the prioritization phase, that's when you can really go and refocus the class to, you know, what are we going to prioritize here? Even with the very divergent ones, they're up there on the board, but, you know, and I was talking with Lynn, and she mentioned this: point to your learning objective, and the kids will probably look at it for the first time that day, and they'll say, oh, what aligns most with our learning objective? Oh, that's our learning objective. And they'll pick something that is most related to that. later in the discussion, you can talk about some of those divergent questions, and then that gives them space to think about their thinking and behavior. But I really liked what Lynn had to say about that. Just look at the learning objective and look at their questions, and they can make a decision. And that's they're able to sort of refocus themselves that way. And I really love that idea. So thank you, Lynn, for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Johnny. That is the perfect segue to handing it over
More about
fully
me.
to you. I will say this thumbnail image is from an awesome classroom video we have of Johnny and his students. So further watching for you after this, we'll add it to the event page. All yours, Johnny, and tell me when you want me to.
Cool. Yeah, that was during the pandemic in the first year. Okay. And this is sort of like of a model classroom. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes, we lost you for a second, but you're back.
All right, sorry about that. So yeah, this is a model classroom. This is not usually my experience with the QFT. These are like, AP students, a small group of motivated kids who knew they were on camera, and so they were performing. It's a great video, and you can see how to do it with using a shared Google Doc. But the example I want to give to you is one that was more common in my classroom. That's about 30 kids. And like I was telling the people I was working with, it's of all abilities, about 20% with IEPs, a lot of ELs, behavior issues, just like any other, public school classroom. If we can go to that next page. And so, yeah, the topic in the 10th grade history curriculum, it's imperialism, and toward the end of the unit, we talk about resistance to imperialism, and it's a lesson that I taught before, but I decided to amend it to make it into a QFT lesson. One of the things that used to drive me crazy about when I was teaching a lesson was by the end of the lesson, I'd get to something really important that I want them to appreciate or complex. But by the time I was like, I want you to look at this picture and realize that this is not just happening in this one space and time, but it was influencing later events, and the bell rings and the kids run out and they don't care and no one ever sinks in. With the QFT, you end up sort of flipping this where you start with what you want them to appreciate, and then so they start there by wondering what they should appreciate, asking questions about it, and by the end they're going to have that appreciation for it. Yeah, if you could go to the next slide, please. This is the Q focus that I chose. When you're picking a Q focus, try to make it as easy as possible for yourself in the beginning. If you're going to have them read a textbook, is there a picture in there? You can use that. Is there a phrase or a small, and with language, you only want to use, I'd say like a sentence, no more than that. And if it's too long of a sentence, just, a few words together, something that you really want them to hone in on. Also, if you're using words, make sure that they know what the words mean. So there's no vocabulary issue, or if you've front loaded that vocabulary. In this case, I like to use images just because it cuts across their reading. It's also something that they are bombarded with every day. Kids on social media are constantly given images that that you want them eventually to be able to question, to be able to appreciate, to be able to try to gain context from. And so in lots of ways, we're sort of modeling behavior that we'd like to see out of mature adults who are being bombarded with provocative images. So anyway, this lesson was about Gandhi's resistance. And this is usually the last photograph that I'd show kids to see, look what an influence Gandhi had. But here we're starting with it. And I know that all my kids know who Martin Luther King is, but don't necessarily know who Gandhi is. All right, if we can go to the next one. I think was there another picture?
Oh, yeah, here it is.
Oh, yeah. So usually I would when I first did this QFT, I did the full size image, but people were asking questions about what's on his desk, about his office, things like that. And I just wanted them to ask questions about the connection between Gandhi and King. And so that's why I cropped it. So, you know, use that editing ability that you have to crop, and then it will allow you to also have, you know, discussions where students think about, how are photographs cropped that I run into? Is there more to this that I'm not sure of? And this is one of those sort of deeper historical evaluations that can sort of really naturally come into your practice too. But here's a look at one of my classes questions. If we could look at them. So, you know, here, you know, these are, you can see like the questions are numbered, and then obviously this one was highlighted where I told them, you know, someone studying imperialism and resistance to imperialism, which one would you pick? And you can see that some of them are not, you know, necessarily related. There was and I taught this, I think at least 50 times because I have 5 classes a day, you know, teaching the same material. A good thing about this, if you do teach a lot of the same material again and again, is that you'll get different responses. It makes it more exciting for you, but you generally know the direction in which it's going to go. And so basically they highlighted this, and I basically manipulated them into wanting to understand the connection between King and Gandhi. They phrased it this way, but you know, one of the things I also love about QFT, and especially with elementary school students, is when it says write down the question exactly as stated as a rule, I tell them there, you know, don't worry about spelling, don't worry about grammar. That's not the important thing. We're just going to write down what you think. That's where your genius is. Don't worry about any of those other things. You fix that later in your editing process. But that's why, you know, as you're looking at some of these, you know, they're not grammatically correct. That's okay. And that shouldn't be a place where kids shut down. And so this really allows them to be involved and feel involved in the process. And as Lynn was saying earlier, who's teaching special ed right now, it really differentiates for your entire class. Everyone feels like they can ask a question, especially if there's no judgment. There's just relief in the classroom for the kids where they're not going to be judged, whether it's the top students needing to ask a good question or the other kids who are worried about being called stupid or asking a so-called dumb question. It doesn't exist in this process. And it's also great for the teacher who doesn't have to make those judgments there. All right, if we can go to the next one.
Keep moving.
Oh yeah, we can keep, so I use this as evidence as the first piece of evidence. And so when they were asking, where is this at, was one of the questions, and they could answer it immediately. Oh, he's in his office. And so things like that, they can realize that, oh, I just look a little closer at a primary source and I can get important information there. Maybe something that they hadn't connected earlier. So I really like the idea of cropping and then providing evidence as sort of as the full picture. Okay. I also wanted to show you what a faster version of doing a QFT looks like. You know, as awesome as it looks when you see groups of students writing at their desk on butcher paper, it's really hard to implement that. And you have to have a certain level of behavior management that I honestly did not have in my classroom. And especially when I introduced the QFT, now I introduce it in like the second week of school. But I wanted to get through those questions. I wanted to prioritize it so I could get to the work that I wanted to do, which was have them read with a purpose, watch a video with a purpose, and then write about the evidence that they found to answer their question. So in this, I serve as the scribe. I project the Q focus on the board, and I just say, okay, shout them out. And they start shouting out questions. I write them down on the board as we go and number them. Oh yeah, this is similar to, oh, this is the same lesson, yeah. And then as we sort of go through and we're reading, we can put answers up on the board too. That can help them. The thing I do with these lessons every time, just because I'm into the claim evidence reasoning, throwing Common Core at them constantly, is so they take the priority open-ended question. This becomes their exit ticket. So they write their open-ended question at the top. And then throughout the lesson, they have to write a paragraph using a claim, relevant evidence, and then analysis or reasoning. And they get in this habit, and it's really cool. So even though you're doing different QFTs, I like to do my claim evidence reasoning paragraphs the same. And also I can give out blank pieces of paper. I don't need to, create beautiful little diagrams or anything like that on a page. They write down their question. We can open textbook. I can throw up a movie. We can look at different sources. They can go on a website. Oh yeah, there it is. We read a textbook as a class. This is something we did before anyway, but here they're actually interested and they're reading with a purpose, which is one of those things that, it's one of the sort of magic bullet things that you're looking for. How can I get my kids to read with a purpose? Well, they've already formulated a question that they're looking for answers, and they're shouting, "Oh, that's evidence right there." And they're, watching a film with a purpose, researching for a purpose. The claim evidence reasoning paragraph. And then finally at the end, what you do when you have them research a priority open-ended question is now for all those sort of silly questions or divergent questions, you can have a more reasoned discussion with the kids about them. Or you can just go through it one by one and be like, what's the answer to this? What's the answer to this? What's the answer to this? And so for example, like, some kids, especially sophomores, they'll ask questions that are meant to be provocative also back at you. And instead of having to emotionally react as a teacher and get triggered like I do too often when my students are trying to get me and press my buttons, I'm able to just sit back and say thank you and write down exactly what they said on the board, which serves as evidence for me later to be like, what were you thinking about? And then later at the end of the lesson, they're like, oh yeah, I think I was just trying to be, I don't know. Like one was asking, why does he look like an alien? And so it meant to sort of, intimidate or either get me or make his classmates laugh, which is fine. But then we were able to look at the question after we'd read all about it and said, oh, Gandhi chose to dress the way he dresses because he was protesting against the British cultural domination of India, and he wove his own clothes. And he also went through hunger strikes, which is why he looked so emaciated. So this, why does he look like an alien question, was actually surprisingly profound. Another question, are they both Black? Which seems sort of ignorant on its face. We ended up having a discussion of like, well, they're people of color, and they were both fighting against white supremacy. And so we were able to have a more nuanced, less emotionally charged discussion about these things. And they're, by actually writing down what they say, even if it might be offensive in the beginning or weird, you sort of have you've got evidence, basically a log of their thinking, and they can reflect on their thinking. And being able to do that metacognition at the end is also another one of those magic bullets that's really hard to sort of impose on your class, but this process ends up sort of naturally creating that at the end of the lesson. All right, have I spoken too much?
No, we might have you speak again after this one reflection. This is from your student as well, right?
It is, yeah. I also with me, like I was getting a little burnt out with either teaching the same stuff or feeling like I had to control my students all the time. This, I was really able to step back and truly sort of realize what it meant to be that facilitator or guide on the side. I have them write down their thoughts about it. It helped me look at my classroom more as an experiment and less of some kind of like a personal battle. I know that might sound a little weird, but sometimes it really helps to be able to, to observe and as we teach. And sometimes we can get so emotionally drawn in, it can make our ability to manage or to teach more difficult. But anyway, I found that this process helped in that. And I was shocked by what my students were able to
Oops.
You
Looks like
froze.
we've momentarily lost Johnny. Hopefully he can revisit us. Yeah, well, I'll just set it up now and hope that he can join us. But just to continue drawing from Johnny's expertise, as well as Katie and I as a resource while we're here, we thought what better way to get all our questions out in a Q&A than by doing a QFT. Oh, hi, Johnny. You back?
Hi, sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's all right. I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you want to finish your thought? Oh,
Having them reflect on the process at the end and put up a little sticker. That's another, one of those magic bullets if you're being like observed or something, or just for your own appreciation of your students. This is, metacognition, and you'll be impressed. And I think your students will also be impressed and empowered by what they're able to articulate about this process.
Thank you so much. To open it up now, to make sure that you can ask any questions you have to Johnny or to Katie and I, we have a mini QFT. We won't go through the whole process, but we have this question focused prompt for us to respond to. Questions I now have about tailoring the QFT to my students. So I really like for you all to take, it may not feel like a lot, but a minute or so to just brainstorm any questions you have in response to this. And as a reminder, the 4 rules are there. So take a minute now to generate some questions for Johnny or for Katie and I.
And are they writing them in the chat, Iman, or writing on their own?
Thank you. Write that on your own for now. I'll have one more instruction for you. So take the minute just to write on your own your questions. Okay, we're moving pretty quickly, but try and wrap up your latest question, because I'm now going to ask you to take another minute to choose the 3 that you feel are most important for you to have addressed, and try and share those 3 or 1. I know typing isn't can't always be the quickest, but try and share 3 questions in the chat and take a minute to just choose those. And whenever you're ready, please share them in the chat.
If I could add on a little bit, I did this with some guest speakers where I had the students come up with questions the day before and prioritize them. And it made a guest speaker a lot more. I actually just invited my friend who's a teacher next door to come in and talk to our class, and to have those questions, it helped. That could be a good sort of easier way to start this process.
I want to ask one question from before, which was about Johnny. Have you ever done a chart as a Q or data as a Q focus, or do you think that's too much for a Q focus? Any thoughts about that?
I think you know your students best, and so that's where you sort of have carte blanche. It's if you think your students have, if you've just looked at charts, and they look at them all and go for it, or if you want them to understand, Oh,
you're kind of going in and out, but I think, I think got the gist of that about knowing your own students and kind of their background knowledge really helps determining the Q focus. Let me ask a few of these. what's the most important element of the process when starting QFT? That's interesting.
I would say
right?
just getting those rules down.
Yeah. The 4 rules. Let's see. How can I manage QFT with 3rd graders? I can answer that really quick. We have, we were actually going to share some resources about using this with kind of tips for adapting the QFT for different audiences. And for early learners. So there's a blog about using it in elementary school that I can share. That might be helpful. But I think, you know, kids are some of the best question askers. So they often have a good time with this process anyway, or do well with it. You might want to break up kind of it might be about timing, you know, breaking it up over several days or giving them more time with each step.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
I was saying there's some questions about redirecting a small group. I usually start doing a full class one where you're the scribe that can model sort of how the process works, maybe doing that a few times so the students are really familiar with how it works before you put them into smaller groups. Because sometimes kids who aren't behaving, it's usually just because they don't know what the rules are.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not keeping up here. Let's see.
I see one about how to effectively manage the time during class. Maybe Johnny could speak to that, but we can also point you to a resource we have, a timing guide, which just breaks down if you have 40 minutes, here's how to allot your time. If you have 10, here's what you can do. So we can share that as well.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, generally I would say it probably takes about a class period. I don't know if you already said that, but like 40 to 50 minutes it can take, or, you know, and the first time it's going to take more time, might take up to an hour. And then obviously depends on the age of the students. But you can start to really shorten it and make it quicker as the students learn the steps and, you know, as you start to take out some elements that they have already done a bunch of times.
Yeah, I'd say also resources to find images. I'd say look at what you already have. You know, is there an image in a book that you're about to read? Is there a still frame from a short film you're going to show your students? Start with that. You don't need to rewrite your curriculum. Please don't. That takes too much time and you don't have that. So take something that you just want them to appreciate that's already there. What's one thing would never do during a Q focus? You know, honestly, whenever I get sort of emotionally like upset about how it's going, I'll just go back to the rules. I'll look at the rule and I'll just have the students read the rules again. That is a great way of centering the class. It really works to center your students and yourself.
Maybe one more question with the time we have.
Oh, you also have math resources, right?
We do, yes. We have a slide deck of some examples and a couple of math blogs. So that's another thing we can add to the event page, and I'll reshare that with you, Wendy. I know there's tons of links coming in, so we can gather that.
I'm going to put in the chat right now our resource, like our main resources page, where you can, it's kind of long, so scroll down, but there are things on different subject areas and grade levels.
Awesome. Do you see anything else, Katie, that you think we might not have covered even a little bit? No, we're running up on time.
There is a question about how long should the process take? Like, especially if you're talking about primary classes, like if you could kind of, I know there's no specific time, but just generally.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that, you can do it in an hour, but again, like for young students, it might take up to 2 to 3, hours or whatever broken over time, or not even hours, but just little periods over time. That's not a great answer, but that
Also
yeah, go ahead.
the first time you do it, it's going to take longer because your kids need to learn the rules, and you usually go through all the different steps. I was going to say like 45 minutes, but then once you do it more often, like I could do it in like 5 to 10 minutes. Like you don't have to talk about what's the advantage and disadvantage of closed and open-ended questions. They've already done that a few times. But the first time will take, like 45, 50 minutes usually.
We have yet another video, and it's another video of a 4th grade classroom that has a ton of experience. So it's not their first time, but it could also just be another snapshot to share with you all of these students who are so used to it. The teacher doesn't need to explain the closed versus open. It's kind of just a part of their classroom culture, and that saves the teacher a little bit of time. But that's a more complex unit over a few days. But yes, there are ways to break up the QFT, especially for younger students. Oh yeah, thank you so much, Katie. Great. Well, I don't know if you're saving this chat, but it might be helpful for us to revisit some of these questions, and we can sort through and see if there's anything we didn't address and can follow up with you about. We're definitely out of time, but this will be a crucial resource I want to leave you all with. It's our document of tips for making the QFT work well for all students, and it's the result of learning from tons of teachers who are, especially in special education or ELL, or working in early grade levels. So these are some tips, tried and true, from teachers who have made adjustments to make the QFT work better for their students. So really encourage you all to take a look at that as you go into facilitating it for your students. And these are just to remind you that these are things you consider in any lesson, and it's the same with the QFT. You can make adjustments as needed. So looking ahead, we hope to see you all again in late spring, early summer, and by then we want to hear all about how it's gone. We hope you've facilitated it with your students. If you've already given it a shot, this is just an opportunity to create a new Q focus, or like Johnny has spoken about, look at your existing curriculum. What's coming up? Where do you see the chance to bring in the QFT? And that final session will be all about sustaining that culture of questioning. So I'm sure you all are going to have lots of questions about what you do now with the student questions, and there's so many ways you can go, but our last session will focus on concrete strategies to propel your next steps with your student questions. And that is that. So thank you all for joining us today and continuing to do some homework.
Thank you so much. Wonderful shout out. Thank you so much, Johnny, for sharing your experiences with QFT in the classroom. Katie, Amon, thank you all so very much. I am going to drop the chat or our evaluation link in the chat. I know it was very helpful to me, just kind of hearing some practical, I love the idea of the exit slips, taking what you did. Time is always an essence in every classroom, and seeing, hey, if you don't have time to do the group posters, round table chats, you journaling that down, especially in some of our elementary, primary classrooms, where the teacher's the scribe. I love that idea. But also the exit slips where you were taking that claim evidence reasoning. I love that strategy. And just, again, that metacognition log. Thank you for that. So I know several wheels are turning in our heads thinking about how we can go back and implement this into our classrooms, immediately. Love this. Thank you. Today was great. And one thing that I will add is if you are currently already using QFT in your classroom, or maybe you're thinking about, I've got this upcoming lesson, I'm going to try to plug this in, be sure that you tag Right Question Institute on Twitter. Let them see the great things that you're doing in their classroom. I know they love to like and retweet all the great things that that we're doing as evidence of their work and their help with us in this grant. So thank you all so much for being here. We will stay on. If Iman is putting, Katie's putting Iman and their email in the chat. And then we will let you know. I know Iman and I are talking about possible summer conference sessions. So we will get those dates to you as well for session number 4. So thank you all again so much. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Feel free to reach out ever by email if you have questions or want to run ideas by us. We're always excited to learn about what you're working on. And yes, Twitter is great.
Yes, we think so too.
Thanks, Johnny, Iman, Katie. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.